my name is Satya and I'm going to do a presentation on enterprise transformation. And the topic of my choice is value management, which will delve into value-based pricing. So value management is how a company, before it transforms, figures out how its value is worth and how it's able to maintain itself. And its effects are mainly on how it can keep itself sustainable, keep its products viable to all the customers, and also to improve its customer base. Now, in order to transform effectively, they have to understand that they have to put a value on the products they have, and this concept is known as value-based pricing. So value-based pricing is pretty important in the sense that it involves three factors, which is the customer, the revenue, and the product. Each of it has an effect on each other. For the revenue, when value-based pricing is in mind, you maintain or improve the amount of revenue you have. This is because most companies who, instead of doing cost-based sales, they'll be using the idea of letting the customer decide how good the product is. And if the customer likes the product more and more, this will allow the company to earn more as time goes by. The customer effect, I would like to say, would be how the customer has a say in the final product or the effectiveness of the product. So in value-based pricing, the customer would actually aid the product in improving itself. And lastly, the product itself would undergo more rigorous change, more improvement, and finally would be able to reach its maximum potential. Next, so how to initiate value-based pricing? The process involves 4 steps. Step 1 is the buyer persona. Step 2 is the customer base. Step 3 is the data analysis. And step 4 is the testing and review process. So I'll go through each of the steps slowly. Now, the buyer persona is really important. This is a fictional character, sort of a scenario-based character that is the ideal customer of a company. So for Apple, they have a youth who's using the iPhone and the iPod, or a busy businessman who's using the iMac, or a company who's using multiple Apple computers. So a normal company would have multiple personas. Just like how I described with Apple, there's not just one target in mind, there's a few. They try to aim for a generation of sorts. The same thing could be said for Sony. Sony has cameras for the photography enthusiasts. They have computers for those who are involved in computer-based work. And lastly, they have tons of entertainment like the PS3 and 4, as well as the PSP. Now, companies will try to make sure that they can meet all the other personas without having any or little sort of negative effects. Now, each persona has a pain of sorts. So just like I mentioned, a photographer would want a stable camera, a computer user would want a computer that has enough performance at the same time portability, and a person who wants games and entertainment will want a console that works. The next thing to do is to survey the customer base. So with the fictional customer ideal, you'd want to go into the public and figure out what are my real customers, where can I find them? And then with the same survey system, you try and figure out from the customer how much would they appreciate this. This can be done in small surveys that are done in the public, or getting a test group. So you have a neutral test group and a test group that's inclined to a certain product. And by doing that, you can ascertain how much the customer would appreciate this new product or appreciate an upgrade to a current product. The analysis process is when you already have the surveys done, and what you do is you study what you've received from the data. Now, then you make pricing tiers. Pricing tiers is sort of how the products that you have would have different amounts of value as to how much the customer wants from it. If you take, for example, the PS4, there is a PS4 bundle for just one player, or for those with a family, there's multiple things, or for those who have many friends, they would have multiple bundles. And this encourages much diversity and variance in the pricing in order to meet different customers. So if I go back to Apple, you could even have student-based pricing for people who want certain things, or professional organizations. Now, lastly is the testing and review. This process is just iterative, so it's trial and error, just to make sure that the customer gets the best of the product without the company losing out. So the customer's interest always changes, so like I said, so assessment is necessary. And the next thing they need to do is just identify the changes that happens and make sure that the company doesn't lose out, like how Nokia had many issues in their products because they didn't actually survey what the customer wanted. They just produced what they thought was good without checking with the customers. And also the last thing they need to do is make sure that the final products are assessed and tested for against the customers to make sure that customers are using as much of the products as possible, and if there's a change, they should change up their services. And that should conclude my discussion on value-based pricing. Thank you.